Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Yes, technically, Geek, I see in the chat, I am on time. I started the live stream a little bit before 6, and I didn't actually come on camera until a little bit after 6, but I feel like I should get credit for it anyway. Because what I was doing before I came on camera just now was I was double checking to see if there were any last second questions submitted by a patron or a channel member for the first segment. I always keep it right down the wire so that people have right up until the show actually starts to submit their question. And that's what I was doing. So I don't feel like that should be held against me. I think it's only fair that I get full credit for coming on time. Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. As I was just jabbering about, I will be answering questions that were submitted ahead of time. Yeah, CMAC didn't submit a question this time, so he must be busy. But yeah, I will be answering pre-submitted questions from patrons and channel members first. So as always, if you're watching live and you're in the chat and you have a question or you were planning on throwing me a super chat or something like that, if possible, please hold on to anything you have that you want me to see until I get through the patron and member questions, because while I'm answering those for the first part of the show, I will not be paying close attention to the live chat, although I did just see Dana say that life isn't fair. And that is very true, isn't it? All right. So let's start out with the pre-submitted questions from patrons and channel members. And the first one comes from Black Cover 95, who thinks your show and all its characters are well, thank you very much. That's a very nice thing to say. If Stuffy is meant to be essentially a better version of you, does that technically make him a form of Mary Sue? For that matter, is Husky Society a Mary Sue society? Granted, Millicent is extremely haughty, but that seems to be specific to her rather than indicative of the culture overall. I guess, I don't know. I guess you could call Stuffy a Mary Sue character. I mean, he's maybe a Mary Sue in terms of his morality and his compassion. I mean, there have been episodes where Stuffy, I mean, he doesn't necessarily do anything bad, but he is shown to be fallible. He's not like perfect. He's not a total saint. But I guess it might be fair to call him a Mary Sue, but I don't think of him that way. And I don't, I just think of him as Stuffy, you know? And also Stuffy's goodness is occasionally used as fodder for jokes in the show. And typically if a character is a Mary Sue, their Mary Sue-ness is not acknowledged. The other characters don't notice, like, hey, wait a minute, he's suspiciously competent at everything. Like that usually does. There's not that level of self-awareness within the work of the Mary Sue character. And as for Husky Society being a Mary Sue society, no, it's not. The idea of Husky Society originally, and I think, I mean, it's diversified a little bit and will diversify further when we get into the new show. Whenever we get to the point of actually producing and releasing the Stuffy and Friends series, like as full episodes. There will be more Husky related stuff in that. Obviously not with Millicent, because Millicent is one of the characters that has been retired, but there will be another Husky character who will be a very different character than Millicent, but will allow us to sort of look at Husky Society from a different angle. But the idea of Husky Society originally was, the joke for me was that, yes, they were very stuck up. Yes, they were very full of themselves. Yes, they have these very bizarre, ahistorical, unscientific beliefs about the nature of the world and their place in it, or at least the members of Millicent's particular religion do. Like, and it's implied, and I think I've always sort of assumed that they were the majority. Like, not all Huskies are like that, because we met Millicent's sister and she wasn't like that. And it's been, I think we implied that the rest of Millicent's family isn't like that either. But a lot of Huskies are like Millicent and have these beliefs and have this sort of air about them. And the joke was that despite all that, despite them being really stuck up and full of themselves and having these, beliefs that are analogous to like young earth creationist type beliefs, that they have also managed to structure for themselves a superior society to ours. That even though they have these wacky beliefs, and even though they are very stuck up, uh, they have basic income, they have universal health care, they don't have poverty, they don't have homelessness. Like they have solved the problems that have plagued human society for forever. So I thought that, and I just thought that was funny. That let's give them let's use them to satirize religious fundamentalism, and let's present them as being very sort of stuck up. But let's also say, oh, but by the way, they have also created a fundamentally superior society to human society. Um, so yeah, that's the idea. That's the deal with the Husky Society. I'm looking forward to exploring different angles of it in the future when we get back into doing the show. Um, Carlisle the Cinephile says, "Hey Steve, last Ask Away someone asked about your thoughts on No Way Home, and you said you enjoyed it. I've seen it twice, and I absolutely loved it both times. During the second viewing, my roommate brought up a really interesting point about how the movie depicts Spider-Man dealing with the antagonists. He said it was a very progressive take because instead of merely beating them up and locking them away or killing them, he tries to help them overcome whatever made them turn to crime in the first place and give them second chances. It's the difference between punitive and restorative justice. I think he was absolutely right about that interpretation. What do you think? Also, do you think how do you think the film handles the subject? Also, did seeing Toby and Andrew again make you wish they'd each get one last solo movie each, since neither one really got to end on a high note? Um, I did not think of it in terms of restorative versus retributive justice, but now that you say that, it makes sense. I do think you can read the movie that way, having only seen it once, but from what I remember, um, I read it more in Spider-Man terms. The thing that I liked about it was that it made it a very Spider-Man story, and it made the MCU version of Peter feel more like the classic comic book Spidey than he has uh, up to that point. And I have really liked that version of Spider-Man. Like I've really liked the Tom Holland Spidey, but giving him that conviction of it's wrong to just send them back and let them die. You know, he wants to reach out and try to find their better selves. He wants to help them, not just defeat them and condemn them to death, or accept that their fate is to die, right? He wants to defy that and to try to do some good for them. Like that's a very Spider-Man thing to do. And the fact that it eventually comes back to bite him in the ass is a very Spider-Man thing to happen. And I really, really appreciated that as a longtime Spider-Man fan. So I liked it for that reason, but looking at it in terms of restorative justice, I think works too. I think that's a very valid interpretation. And again, I don't know if that was necessarily something that was on the minds of the filmmakers. I think they were thinking in terms of this is a classic Spider-Man story, but I think you can read the movie that way, and I think it holds up. And I don't know. I think the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man got enough of a send-off in No Way Home that I wouldn't really think his version of Spidey needs another movie for closure. I mean, he's a good Spider-Man, and if somebody had an idea for a good movie featuring him as Spider-Man, I'd be all for it. But I don't think uh, after that movie that his particular version of the character is crying out for closure. I think he got a, I think his version of the character probably got a lot more closure than Tobey Maguire's did out of No Way Home. I would love to see Tobey Maguire play Spider-Man again because he's my favorite Spider-Man. He's my Spider-Man. I loved him as Spidey. His first two Spidey movies especially are two of my favorite superhero movies ever, and Spider-Man 2 is way, way, way up there and is still by far my favorite Spider-Man movie. Like it's not even close. Second place is either the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire or Into the Spider-Verse, depending on how I'm feeling that day. And it doesn't matter because either one is way, way behind Spider-Man 2. Um, but Yeah, I would like to see Toby play Spider-Man again in his own movie just for the sake of seeing it, because I love that version of the character and I love him as Peter and as Spidey. But, I mean, we left, yeah, Spider-Man 3 wasn't a great movie, but we left Peter on a good note. He had sort of redeemed himself and he came back, and there was sort of an unspoken reconciliation with Mary Jane, and the movie ended on a very sweet note of the two of them sort of forgiving each other, or her forgiving him. He doesn't really have anything to forgive her for. Um, her forgiving him, and them coming back together. It's a nice note to leave that character on. So I'm not necessarily crying out for another Toby Spidey movie either, but I wouldn't complain, especially if Sam Raimi came back to direct it again. Here's a question from Steve. um, what a great name. Steve says, "Hi, Steve. Do you currently have any plans to get out of Dodge if things go south in 2024? If so, where are you looking at? I'm considering England right now, since my dad's side of the family is from there personally, and while there are issues, it's nowhere near what it might be coming in the next 10 years in America. I don't have any plans because I don't think I could afford it. Um, Even if I could afford it, I don't know if I would go anywhere else, because there would be people that I would want to come with me, and I think they're probably too stubborn to go. Um, so that would be a hitch in the plan as well. But no, I don't have any serious plans. I've joked in the past about Canada, and I hear Vancouver is nice, that sort of thing. But I've never had any serious plans, and I have no serious plans at the moment to relocate, mostly because I couldn't afford it. But even if I could, there would be other things that would sort of throw a wrench in the works, where I'd be like, nah, I don't think I can go. So no. But if it comes to that, I hope your move to England is successful. David Colby says, people keep saying Galaxy Quest is the best Star Trek, which is absurd, obviously. Master and Commander Far Side of the World is the best Star Trek movie. Actually, the Master and Commander series was written in the 1970s by a big nerd, Patrick O'Brien, who I know is a big fucking nerd because he wrote like 30 books about Napoleonic sailing ships. And thus, being a nerd, we can say for sure that he saw Star Trek, which aired before he wrote the series, which does explain why Captain Jack Aubrey and Dr. Stephen Maturine have a very Kirk Spock vibes going on. And admit it, you'd love to see Spock going on espionage missions for the Federation. Is being a Vulcan a bit like being Irish? I have no choice but to say yes. Also, if you haven't seen Master and Commander, check it out. It's the best spaceship movie ever made that isn't set on a spaceship. This is because all spaceships in fiction aren't spaceships. They're just sailing ships in space. Well, that last bit is definitely true. That I got a comment, I think, on one of my Star Trek videos recently from someone who said, like, why do the ships move like that? Why don't they move in 3 dimensions in Star Trek like they would in real life? And it's because it's a naval metaphor. That's the main reason why, for the most part, the ships all are sort of on the same plane when they're out in space, because it's, they're not really spaceships. They're sailing ships. And yeah, I saw Master and Commander once the year it came out. It's been a very long time. I remember really liking it, and so if people say that it reminds them of a Star Trek movie, I mean, I can kind of see that. I that makes sense to me. But like I said, it's been a very long time since I saw the movie. I've only seen it once, whereas I've seen Galaxy Quest a whole bunch of times. So that just comes to my mind much more readily. But I like Master and Commander. So I am not, and I see where people are coming from when they say that the characters are similar and the story is similar to a Star Trek story. So I have no objections to that. I'm not particularly attached to the suggestion, but I don't have a problem with it. It makes sense. And I've heard other people say it too. So you're not as original as you think. Okay. You're more original than people who say Galaxy Quest for sure, but don't get cocky. Just what I'm saying, keep a level head. Here's a question from Madeline, who says, good evening, Steve. In honor of Threshold Day last week, what's your favorite terrible Star Trek episode? Oh, I mean, I feel like this is another example of my taste not being all that adventurous for the most part, and me usually falling pretty much in the middle of the road. But I would have to say my favorite bad Star Trek episode is probably Spock's brain, because I don't know if there has ever been another more gloriously weird sight in Star Trek, or just bizarre idea that actually made it into the show than the idea of, well, it's a couple of things all sort of thrown together into one concept. Aliens steal Spock's brain, hence the title, to run their supercomputer. And while they are on a mission to get Spock's brain back, because McCoy and Kirk go set off to this planet to get back Spock's brain before his body dies, because they've managed to put his body in stasis so his body doesn't die before his brain can be replaced. They hook Spock's body up to like remote control servos, so Spock's brainless body, this like mechanical zombie Spock, is just following them around for the entire episode. It's so weird and so dumb and so bad, and I love it so. There are other episodes of Star Trek that I genuinely like, that a lot of people think are bad episodes, that I don't think are bad episodes. Like the Alan Moraine episode of Deep Space Nine, which the title of which is completely evading me at the moment, and I feel like I can't think of the title. But anyway, the Alan Moraine episode of Deep Space Nine, I really like that episode. I don't think that's a bad episode that I like. I think that's a good episode that I like that other people don't like. But of the episodes of Star Trek that I think are actually terrible, Spock's brain is easily my favorite. Agent Meister in Ireland, Peldor Joys, Steve. Okay, I've been a patron for over a year now, and I've resisted the urge to message you about Trump, but I recently saw a clip of his rally in Texas when he all but promised to pardon the meatheads involved in the Capitol riots if he's ever reelected. So I gotta ask, what the fuck is going on in the US? I remember growing up watching American TV and movies, and your country seemed like a great place to live. I'm a little older and wiser now, and I don't have to squint so hard to see the flaw in that logic, especially when it comes to topics you cover and where do we go from here. But it's not the worst place in the world either. Credit where it's due. The US has done a lot for the world. I've visited several times, and I've met some wonderful people, and I can't fathom how nearly 75 million of you voted for Trump and buy into the shit he and people like him peddle. I mean, Jesus. You guys put a man on the fucking moon, and yet this pig still has the appeal he does. Well, you're preaching to the choir, as I imagine you know. It is a nice place to live. The United States is probably the best place in the world to live, provided you are of the right race and ethnicity and you have enough money. I mean, those are the things. Those are, as long as you can pay the race tax and the wealth tax, right? Which we don't actually have, by the way, but you know what I'm saying. As long as you're rich enough and you're white enough, and it helps to be male and cisgender as well. But the main ones are, if you're white and if you're rich enough, the United States is the best place in the world to live. So if you are not in any of those categories, then it, depending on where you are, it can be a pretty terrible place. So it's the inequality that really does it. And as for why did so many people vote for Trump and why do so many people still support him? There has been a decades-long campaign by one of our two major political parties that has unfortunately been unwittingly aided and abetted by the other major political party for a lot of that time, to devalue education, to sow suspicion of intelligence and expertise, to sow doubt about our political institutions and our important cultural institutions in general, to create fear and suspicion of reform, which makes fixing those institutions in ways that they genuinely do need to be fixed difficult. And there's just all kinds of things that the groundwork has been laid for since the 50s or the 60s, that has horribly damaged the culture of this country, that has left that has created an environment where ignorance is often valued higher than knowledge and thoughtfulness, you know. And there's a lot of defensiveness, there's a lot of reactionary responses when there are calls for improvements, when there are calls for reckonings for things like racism and sexism and transphobia and income inequality and xenophobia and all these other problems that afflict us terribly, that make it way more difficult to meaningfully address these problems. So yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is that it's been sabotaged. Not that it was ever perfect. God knows it was never perfect. And there are aspects of it that were way worse 50 or 100 or 200 years ago for certain. But it would be better now, I think, than it is if it had not been sabotaged primarily by conservatives and Republicans, and but like I said, often helped along by Democrats for the last 50 or 60 years. You know, so yeah, I feel I have the exact same thought, my friend. We put a man on the moon, and now look at us. Yeah, it's you are speaking my language, for sure. Move along home. That was the Deep Space Nine episode that I blanked on. Anyway, Jemshin, what should someone do, or do you have any advice for when there's something you have always greatly enjoyed or have an emotional connection to, a series, hobby, etc.? There's a person or persons you associate with that thing you enjoy. That person causes you a great deal of pain or emotional distress. You now associate that thing you used to enjoy with that pain and emotional distress. You can't interact with that thing without that association intruding on your experience. You just want to enjoy that thing again. I mean, if time does not heal the wound, you might just have to find another thing. Like I'm not sure what else you could do. If that association, if that association and that emotion that comes up through that association, or being reminded of that association, continues to be so acute and so uncomfortable that it affects your experience of the thing and you can't enjoy the thing anymore, and that doesn't go away no matter how much time passes since whatever happened, um, then you might have to find another thing. I mean, I hate to I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it may come to that. You may just have to find another thing. You know, there's lots of things. There's other things. You can find some other thing. Look at all the things. Look at, not here. There's no things here, but I mean, just in general throughout the world. Look at all the things. If it comes to picking another thing, there are so many things to pick from. Might have to pick another thing. Frisky Jesus, as someone who was raised in a Christian conservative household, yet having experienced life in a much different way than my parents, I find myself more independent politically in my views. I'm curious, do you find that your political views are more or less in line with how you were raised, or do you feel that your life experiences have made a greater impact? I would say my life experiences have made a greater impact. I am not politically very well in line with most other people that I know in my family. There may be people in my more extended family that are more politically in line with me, but I don't know them. I'm not close to them. So of my immediate family and family members that I have known, I'm not very much in line with them for the most part. There are things that we do agree on, of course, but in general, I'm much more progressive and much further to the left than other people that I know in my family. Um, But like I said, there are things that, you know, there are things that we agree on. There are things that that I can look at in my own philosophy or my own viewpoint and trace them to a family member. Like I know my the importance I attach to sort of seeing that other people are taken care of, to you know, giving support to those in need, supporting things like charities, supporting things like, especially supporting like government programs, social welfare programs, etc. Not being suspicious of poor people on welfare, but saying, oh, good, they're taking advantage of a program that they need that helps them, and we should expand those programs and give more money to those programs because obviously they're needed by a lot of people. That comes from my grandmother, from Granny. She was just an impossibly compassionate person. Um, both my grandparents, even though, and my pap and granny, who used to live in this house that I'm in right now, my dad's parents, they were both fairly conservative in their politics. I think they were both registered Republicans, but they were also pro-choice. They also were that would sort of, when I was younger, when I was in my preteens and teenage years, and I was in my Rush Limbaugh phase, they did not approve of that at all. And actually, I don't think my dad did either. And my dad is probably even more of a sort of traditional conservative type guy than my grandparents were. Um, but I don't think he was really nuts about the Rush Limbaugh phase either. They were not Rush Limbaugh Republicans or Rush Limbaugh conservatives. They did not, you know, they were not impressed by Rush. Um, and nor am I at this point in my life. But when I was younger and you know, didn't know any better, that's a nice excuse. I didn't know any better. Um, you know, I felt differently, but they were always very suspicious and very dismissive of Rush Limbaugh. So that's something I can thank them for as well, sort of planting that seed in my mind. So there are things that my current viewpoint, I think, owes to people in my family, but generally speaking, no, I do not fall in line um, with the politics of my family members. Next question is from Dana, who is having a little more trouble coming up with 6 good things for episode 3. Although, slight update, I talked to you about this today, and I think you told me that you have the 6 now, or you have 5 of the 6. I think you told me you have all 6 now, so that's good. Hopefully, you have. If you don't have all 6 by now, hopefully you'll have them by tomorrow, because tomorrow is the show, as you know. No pressure. You don't need me to tell you that. I'm sorry I even said that. Anyway, your question. We talked about some of your memories of the space shuttle program from when you were very small, Steve, through the Challenger explosion and the hiatus between that and the Discovery launch, which you remember vividly. I think you should share those stories with your audience, though that's not my question. Kids are notoriously impatient, which to some degree is reasonable. When you're 8, 3 years is practically half a lifetime. But you didn't express frustration or doubt about the space program. You said they were going to find out what went wrong and then fix it. There was a simple sort of confidence there that it was a big, important problem, which is why it would take the grown-ups a long time, but that they would solve it. Do you think that's how today's children will feel when they look back on the pandemic? Is it a function of childhood, or of your family and community, or of the specific situation? Boy, that is a good question. The thing is, with the space shuttle program, even at my young age back then, I had reason to assume that it was in good hands. You know, I didn't know very much about it. I was just a kid. I only knew what I saw in the news and what I had been able to read in books or magazines, or, you know, find out on my own, of stuff that was like at my comprehension level, you know. Um, but I had reason to believe that the space shuttle program was in good hands, and that the people who were working on it post Challenger were capable of fixing it and were going to do their best and would be able to fix it, and everything would be okay at some point in the future. I don't know if kids today are getting that impression about COVID. I don't know if kids today are having the sense that we're in good hands. because there are some people and some organizations that seem to know what to do and are trying to do it, or and trying to encourage other people to do it. But then there are other people who seem to have no idea what to do, or think they know what to do but actually don't, and are encouraging people to do some very dangerous things that is only going to cause more people to get sick and die and prolong this awfulness even more. So I think that's the big difference, other than the scope. I mean, obviously the scope of the pandemic is much, much greater than the fate of the space shuttle program. So that's a big difference too. But I think the heart of it is, when I was a kid, I felt like I knew that the folks at NASA had it covered. That obviously some mistakes had made, there had been some accidents, something had gone wrong, but they were in the right position and had the right knowledge and had the right skill, and they were going to figure it out, and they were going to fix it. I don't know if kids today would think the same thing about the pandemic response, and that's a shame. That's a shame, but I think that's the big difference. And maybe after I get through the questions, if people are still interested, I'll share the memories of the space shuttle program from when I was very small, Steve. But I want to get through the rest of the questions. But if people still give a shit after I'm done and they want me to tell the stories I told you the other day, then I will be happy to tell them. Scott P. Hey, Steve, after the most recent episode of the Book of Boba Fett, but I thought I had to express my views on the future of Star Wars. Trek, throughout its history, has been more willing to grow, try new things, and tackle more adult themes and subjects. It's also been far more willing to let go of its past and let us fall in love with new stories and characters, something Star Wars seems to have been struggling with for some time. It seems like what most fans want now, more than anything, is nostalgic power fantasies of their favorite characters, and it appears Disney is more than willing to oblige. I won't act like I didn't enjoy some of it, but it really feels like Star Wars is stuck in arrested development. What do you think? Can Star Wars ever move on from the same core of characters and themes? Also, can we get some queer love in Star Wars? 90s Berman Trek was more progressive and LGBT plus representation than modern Star Wars, for Christ's sake. Can Star Wars ever move on? Yes. I think you could argue that the first season of The Mandalorian represented the potential to do just that. And then they said, okay, enough of that. And they went right back to the fan service at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian. And they have gone back to it with the Boba Fett show too. So yeah, I wish they would too. I mean, I told this, I talked about this with Dana on Wednesday before we started watching the, before we started watching the Hilda episode for our watch along live stream on Wednesday. How I feel about Star Wars right now is like if DC Comics had been just about Batman for 40 years, where like every DC comic story you ever saw was all about Batman, right? Batman was the center of the DC universe. And then suddenly, after, 50 years, they said, hey, we're bringing out a new character. It's going to be in the same world as Batman, but it's going to be its own separate thing. And he's going to be a new hero, and he's going to live in his own city, and he's going to have his own adventures. And, like, it's going to be in Batman's world, but it's going to be its own separate thing. We're going to cover some new territory. And they do that for like a year, and everybody's like, oh, this is awesome. And then at the end of the second year of this awesome new thing, they announce, oh, hey, Batman's going to be on this show too. And as much as you might love Batman, that's not what you want. You were excited about the new thing doing its own thing. You don't want to see Batman on the new show. You've seen Batman in everything for the last 50 years. Now it's time for this new thing to have its own corner, right? And that's what I feel like is happening with The Mandalorian and with the Book of Boba Fett too. Though, like I really liked The Mandalorian the first season, and I liked it to a lesser degree, but still liked it in the second season. I never liked the Book of Boba Fett. I thought it was boring after 2 episodes and stopped watching, and then watched the Mandalorian episode and thought, oh, it's a below average episode of the Mandalorian, you know. um, um, so and Luke Skywalker. I love Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is my favorite Star Wars character. I love Luke Skywalker. I don't want to see Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian's doing his own thing. Let him do his own thing. Let them cover new ground. Let them introduce new characters. Let him go off and have adventures that have nothing to do with fucking Luke Skywalker. As much as I love Luke, I don't want to see him in this show. This is supposed to be its own thing. And that's what annoys me about it. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that they can't resist going back to the old stuff, even when they have proven that they can do new stuff and have it be good. They can't resist. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence. I don't know if it's the fact that the people in charge of it now, John Favreau and especially Filoni, are just huge fucking nerds and their heads are just disappearing up their own asses. I don't know what it is, but they've shown that they can create successful new stuff. And I'm talking live. I don't give a shit about the animated stuff. I'm talking about live action Star Wars, right? They've shown that they can do it. They don't need to bring Luke Skywalker in. You know what I mean? Like, the show was great on its own in the first season. And it's like they just want to keep doing fan service, and that's disappointing. They don't have to. They can go and do something else, but will they? I don't know. And yeah, some more queer representation would be great too. I agree completely. They've gotten a lot better at diversifying it racially and having more meaningful female characters in the show and in the movies. They've made a lot of improvements as far as that. But in terms of LGBTQ representation, yeah, they still have a long way to go. And I would love to see them get there with that as well. But yeah, I agree with you. And you know, and I have to say, Star Trek has traditionally been better at it, but Star Trek has been kind of falling into that pattern lately as well. You know, as much as I have enjoyed Discovery, you know, like Spock was in the second season of Discovery, and Michael, the lead character of Discovery, is Spock's sister. And there's about to be a spinoff of Discovery starting later this year, centered on Captain Pike, who is another legacy character, who is great. Anson Mount is fantastic as Captain Pike, and I love that version of Captain Pike. And I have high hopes for that show, but it's a legacy character. You know, it's looking back, not looking forward, and so that is a trap that is all too easy to fall into. So I think we agree fundamentally on a lot of that stuff. General Contact Unit problem child. You don't think it's a good idea to create armed left-wing militias for some attempted revolution? How do you feel about the idea leftists should have stockpiles of weapons so they can defend themselves and their communities against armed right-wingers in some kind of social collapse scenario where police and military can't or won't stop them? For 50-odd years now, far right-wingers have been setting up armed communities in the Mountain West. Some of them are intended to be the embryos of fascist states they'll emerge and create if the central government in Washington ever collapses. I could easily imagine a scenario where some natural disaster, let's say a major solar flare, compromises the government's ability to control the whole country, and those loons take it as their opportunity to emerge and attempt some takeover. That being the case, I don't think it's crazy for leftists, especially non-white cis or het ones in Boise, to think they should have weapons for community defense. I guess I just don't relate to that kind of catastrophism in my thinking. I mean, maybe I'm fully willing to admit that it may be a mark of my privilege, but I find it difficult to take that scenario seriously. I don't take it seriously when the crazy right wingers say that that's what they're preparing for, and I don't take it seriously when leftists say that that's what they're preparing for. I don't think it's rational to say, "Oh, we're stockpiling guns. But we're doing it because what if the government completely collapses one day and we have to defend ourselves against marauding hordes of whatever?" Like I mean, if it ever happens, there'll be egg all over my face, but it just doesn't seem like something that is remotely worth worrying about. And if anything, it sounds like an excuse to just continue proliferating guns. And I have a problem with that, whether it's leftists or people on the right doing it. If I have to choose, I will say that I think um, gun fetishizing right wingers are more of a threat because they are malevolent. Like they actually, I think, mean people harm, and have this sort of very very hostile, malicious kind of power fantasy driving them, and plus they're motivated, um, at least partially, by some really awful bigotries, and they believe in conspiracy theories, and they're just shitty people, and you wouldn't want them to have firearms. But I'm not a fan of leftists arming themselves either. I do not buy into these revolutionary fantasies of we have to be armed so we can defend ourselves against. But you're selling to the wrong guy when you start talking. Well, Steve, don't you think that leftists should arm themselves in case of it? No, I don't think anybody should be arming themselves. I think we should be reducing the number of guns in the population. I think the number of guns that are proliferate in society is insanely high. And I don't think the solution to that problem is to arm up a particular segment of society. I mean, I prefer leftist gun nuts to right-wing gun nuts because right-wing gun nuts are so fucking off the deep end terrible, but I'm not a fan and I do not approve of leftist gun nuts either. Period. Shazy the Pinko Idealist. Hi, Steve. By the time you read this, my city will have been terrorized for a week now by the Freedom Convoy, a group of truck driving thugs that are protesting the COVID-19 public health measures and vaccine mandates. While most of them have left, there remains a large contingent that has settled until their insane demands of abandoning all public health measures are met. So far, they have harassed anyone near them seen wearing a mask, blasted loud air horns in the downtown core and residential areas day and night, have made minorities afraid to leave their homes, stole food and supplies from homeless shelters, and desecrated monuments to some of our national heroes, namely Terry Fox. Worse, the police refuse to do anything about it. The residents are organizing a counter protest for this Saturday, and I cannot wait to join them. I am livid. I've lost friends and family to this shit. Can you please give some words of encouragement? I really need some right now. Thank you. Well, hopefully the case in Canada is similar to the case in many parts of this country, which is that you will hopefully you have them outnumbered. You know, if you are able to organize a counter protest and you're able to go out and stand against them, hopefully you will be able to dwarf them in numbers and send the message that you crackpots may have a loud voice and you may be able to get attention with stunts like this, but you ultimately do not speak for the majority. And most people recognize that the things that you are asking for, specific to COVID, and also the broader demands of no more public health policies, like that those are insane and irrational and not to be taken seriously. So I mean, I feel like you're on the right side of history, if that's any comfort. You're definitely on the right side of this issue, and I'm very glad to see that and to hear that people will be organizing something to oppose this, because we have these sorts of things in the United States, and they're a hideous embarrassment to those of us who are, um, who think that public health safety measures are a good thing, especially during a pandemic. And I'm glad to see that you all are of the same, thinking the same thing, and are preparing to do something about it. And of course, it's incredibly disappointing that the police refuse to do anything about it, because even if the police are saying like, well, they have a right to protest, they have a right to protest, but they don't have a right to disturb the peace the way it sounds like they're doing. I mean, gathering to peacefully protest, of course, you don't want to, deprive the people of that right. But if they are going out of their way to create a nuisance, um, and especially if they're harassing people who are wearing masks and such in their vicinity like that, that to me is crossing the line. I don't think that should be acceptable. But nevertheless, if that being the case, I wish you all the best of luck with your counter protest. I hope it goes well. I hope everybody is safe, and I hope you get your message across. Because, like I say, you are on the right side of this, and I hope things go well. Here's one from Stephen G. Clenard. Steve, you're a DC Comics guy. Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. Suppose Clark and Lois invite Aquaman and Mara to a romantic Valentine's double date at Hungry Henry's Grub Hut, Metropolis's finest restaurant that offers a Groupon. Does Diana get offended that she and Steve Trevor aren't invited? What if Lois offends the Currys by ordering Captain Hank's endless fried fish feast? What if Batman finds himself on romantic dates at Hungry Henry's with both Selina and Talia at the same time? Does this throw the Justice League into chaos before Starro invades, dooming humanity to alien enslavement? Is this, to quote a wise man, the power of love? Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a villain? Classic 80s sitcom trope man. You might think he's the wacky neighbor, but from his lair beneath the National City Regal Beagle, this crafty criminal concocts convoluted conundrums to harry our hapless heroes' thoughts. Write it. Classic 80s sitcom trope man, I think, is genius. You could have also said that he instead of his secret lair beneath the Regal Beagle, you could have also said that he has a mountain supervillain lair tucked away on the remote island of Mypos. That would also have tickled me greatly. But yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I love the idea of doing a farcical Valentine's dinner scene involving the Justice League members and their various significant others. I think that is fantastic. The idea of Batman being caught in a farcical situation where he has somehow booked a date with both Catwoman and Talia at the same time in the same restaurant, and Batman having to do a Jack Tripper, since you brought up the Regal Beagle. That is delightful to me. Can you imagine Adam West doing that episode? Imagine an episode of the Adam West Batman show, and Talia wasn't in that, but let's imagine Talia was in the Adam West Batman show. So Batman and Talia have a date, and Batman and Catwoman have it. Oh, Bruce Wayne and Talia have a date, and Batman and Catwoman have a date, and they're both in the same restaurant at the same time. So Adam West has to not only go from table to table and spend time with Talia and then spend time with Selina or with Catwoman without either of them noticing, but he also has to change back and forth from Bruce Wayne to Batman as he goes. This is, come on. There's the premise. Somebody write it. And then get a time machine and go back in time to the late 60s and say, you have to make this episode. You have to. Okay? That's, oh God, such a great idea. Next question is from some random geek who wants to kill capitalism. What? This is the first I'm hearing of this. In the past 2 weeks, Joanna Roberts has asked me 11 different times for money. I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing. The end of the month is always tough on her. I also thought, how much money have I given away to all my various friends in need? I looked back through my bank and credit card statements just in 2022 until 2/3/22. I've given away about $2,800 out of $3,770 in net pay. getting paid on 2/4/22. Yeah, about 75% of my net pay. These past weeks are tougher than usual for my friends. Phoenix lost her SNAP. The county took Joanna's trans autistic NB son away to foster care, and another friend's SSI hasn't come in. No resolution so far, forcing them to have to scramble to fundraise $750 for rent, on top of $100 a day for each day of missing the full rent payment. Steve, some of your friends still want to keep a little capitalism for themselves, but capitalism needs poverty. Someone wants capitalism to exist. They want poverty to exist. Join me to end capitalism? Um, I don't know if I agree with all of your premises there. I am not, as I think I've made clear before, I am not married to the concept of capitalism. The problem is I don't see a workable alternative at the moment, and or at least I don't see a workable alternative that would be better than um, vastly improving the system that we have. You know, like I have no problem with nationalizing or socializing certain industries. I have no problem with the government imposing certain standards on private businesses, raising the minimum wage, mandating, you know, certain terms that everybody has to abide by if they're going to be a business with employees, making it much easier for employees to unionize, making it much easier for people to start employee-owned businesses, things like that. Government programs, like I mentioned earlier in the answer to a question, social welfare programs like the ones that your friends depend on that have recently left them out in the cold, being funded more robustly and making them less difficult to qualify for, and so that they are better able to do what they are supposed to do in the first place, which is help people who need help and help to lift people out of poverty. That's the whole reason why they were created in the first place. That's what they should be doing. Um, and they're not doing that because they've been sabotaged over the last 30, 40 years, especially. But there are all these things that I think we can do that will improve people's situation that don't rise to the level of let's overthrow capitalism. And it's not that I'm opposed to overthrowing capitalism on principle or anything. I just, how many people die after we overthrow capitalism? You know, like if your concern is, well, my friends are dying under capitalism, are your friends not going to die under whatever we replace it with? Because I don't see how you're going to be able to install utopia right away. You know, how many people die in the transition? Which there are people who are super attached to capitalism who would fight to prevent it from being taken away. What if that gets messy? Who's going to fight that battle? And how many of those people are going to die? You see what I'm saying? Like, I think it's very easy to say, my friends are suffering under the system. Let's get rid of the system. But that's not a plan. You know, like if I had a magic wand and I could say, let's fix everything, I would do that. And whatever that better world looked like, if it was some improved form of capitalism, if there was no capitalism at all, if it was the way life is in the Federation and Star Trek, whatever it is, I would be all for that. If you could just skip right to that and we've worked out all the issues and we've solved all the problems and nobody would have to suffer and nobody would have to die, and we could just say, let's fix everything and we'll make the world better right now. I would be all for that. But that's not how it's going to work. You know, and I think it is a much better use of my energy. And obviously, look, you continue to do what you think you need to do, both in terms of helping out. I think it's incredible that you help out your friends and you give away that much of your earnings, and that you're able to do that to help your friends out. I think that's tremendous. And you continue to do what you think you need to do in terms of agitprop and in terms of trying to get the word out to people about anti-capitalism and stuff like that. I think do whatever you think you need to do. I think it is a much more productive use of my energy and my time and whatever meager skills and talents I might have to push for changes in the current system, to try to encourage people to educate themselves about certain issues, to try to encourage people to vote and to participate in the political process and to support, you know, local organizations in their communities that try to address these problems and to do things within the current system that don't rise to the level of revolution, but that I think have a much greater practical value in the here and now, and have a much greater chance of bringing about meaningful change in the lives of people than saying, let's get rid of capitalism, because I don't foresee that happening in our lifetime. And I don't know how that would work or what that would look like. And I have very little confidence that the world that would rise in the ashes of that would be better than the one we have now. And certainly would not be better than the one we could build if we actually got together and focused on changing things instead of fantasizing about burning it all down. So anyway, that's just my feeling. But like I say, you do as your conscience demands that you do. But I can't I can't see myself saying let's end capitalism when I have no idea what comes next, and I have no idea what it looks like, Isaiah Taylor says, so I just finished watching QT's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it brought me to the question of nostalgia and its place in society. People have often said that because I like oldies music, 60s, 70s, and 80s, that I would belong in those respective decades. However, being a Black autistic male, we all know how monumentally difficult that would have been. As a white male, an ally, you would understand. Even in the 90s, there were either very little or no resources for autistic people, let alone BIPOC, LGBTQ plus, and women. I was born in 92, and as you know, I love the 1990s. Why do people, especially young people, obsess about time periods that they would find it difficult living in? The concepts of BLM, the anti-work on Reddit, and critique of capitalism, etc., wouldn't exist back then. Yes, the space race and the music of the 60s would have been cool to see, but, So what are your views on nostalgia? Is it escapism or just annoying? Your thoughts. It's both. It is escapism, and it does get annoying. People fantasize about living in time periods that they would find it difficult to live in because they didn't have to live in them. You're absolutely right. As a person of color, as a neurodivergent person, as a LGBTQ person, as a member of any minority group or marginalized group, if you fantasize about living, in the 60s or the 50s or whatever, what you're basically doing is cherry picking the parts of it that you like and saying, oh, wouldn't it have been amazing to live back then because of this, this, and this? And you're forgetting about all of the things back then that would have made life absolutely terrible for you. Some of which still exist today and make life terrible for you now, but would have made life even worse, 50 years ago when a lot of the support that you have now probably would not have been there. So and that's what nostalgia is. My history teacher in high school described it as, and this has been my working definition of nostalgia ever since I first heard this. Nostalgia is remembering things the way they never were. That's what nostalgia is. There is, by definition, a sentimentality to it, and an ignoring of the bad parts. You think of the 60s and you think of the Apollo program, and you don't think of the Vietnam War. Or if you do think of the Vietnam War, you think of it in romantic terms. You think of, the Vietnam War, the protests and the students and the young people rising up to stand against the government and to say, we don't want this war. Like you look at the noble part of it, but there were also 50,000 Americans and God knows how many Vietnamese who died in that war. It was a terrible, terrible war. It would not have been it was not a good thing. Yes, there were noble people who were standing against it, but the war itself was an atrocity. The civil rights movement, filled with heroes, filled with people who won important battles and brought about much needed change. But that change was so badly needed because of the absolutely despicable racism that was everywhere. and that caused a lot of those heroic civil rights leaders and protesters and organizers to be attacked and in some cases killed. It was awful. It was awful. Life really sucked back then for people of color. It still sucks very much today, but it really, really sucked back then. So, yeah, I mean, it is escapism. You're concocting a fantasy. It's a historical fantasy, but it's still a fantasy because you're selecting all the stuff that's attractive to you and you're leaving all the bad stuff out. But if you actually lived in that time, you wouldn't have the option of just screening out the bad stuff. You'd be stuck with the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. So, and when it starts to affect public policy, or when it starts to affect the way people see the here and now, then it becomes not only annoying, it becomes dangerous, because it can warp your view of things. So yeah, I mean, nostalgia is fine in small doses, and it's fine when it is kept in its cage. You know, when you maintain an awareness of what it is, that it is escapism, that it is a fantasy. But if it starts to influence you, and it starts to direct and guide your thinking, and especially if it starts to influence large scale decision making of our society, then it's a terrible thing. It's an absolutely destructive, corrosive thing. Wolfie Basach says, "Hi, Steve. Hope things are fine and dandy. It's been a while since I last wrote, but now being positive for COVID has forced me to stay in the Alcatraz I affectionately call home. My brain has been buzzing around with all sorts of things that need answering. I want to keep the mention of franchises you don't like to a minimum, but I was peeping at some Lord of the Rings and 007 stuff today, which coincidentally brought up the contributions of the actor Christopher Lee. This got me thinking how fantastic it would have been to have had his involvement in a Trek film. And so I'm asking, is there an actor who you feel would have been or could be an excellent addition to the Trek franchise? By the way, I've worked out how many chickens it would take to kill an elephant, so there's no need to worry about that. Well, thank God. He's not like a major star, but I think I've mentioned a couple of times before when people have asked, like, what kind of Star Trek show would you want to make? And I don't know what the show would be, but I know that I would want the captain of the ship to be played by Henry Simmons, who was Detective Baldwin Jones on NYPD Blue and was Mac on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He would be my first choice to lead my Star Trek show, whatever it would turn out to be. So I would, but of more like legendary actors, when you mentioned Christopher Lee, I could throw in Peter Cushing, because I'm a Peter Cushing guy. As much as I love Christopher Lee, and of course they were great friends, but if I had to choose between Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, if I could only have one, I would choose Peter Cushing, and I would go like that, because that's how he always pointed his finger. Peter Cushing, he used the upturned index finger more effectively, I feel, than any other actor. So Peter Cushing is a big one. I was watching something the other day. Kumail Nanjiani, who was in the Eternals movie and was one of the bright spots of the Eternals movie. And I wish they had given him more time, because he was always good and he was always funny. And he's been in lots of stuff lately too. He's terrific. He'd be a good actor for a Star Trek show or a Star Trek movie. Who else? Naomi Harris would be good. Wouldn't Naomi Harris be a great like starship captain? Who's another? Lupita Nyong'o would be great. I would say Idris Elba, but he was already in one. He was in Star Trek Beyond. You could barely recognize him because he was in all the makeup, but that was Idris Elba. Who else would be a good Star Trek actor? I don't know. I'm sure there's a bunch that I can't think of right now, but yeah, I mean, of the classic ones you mentioned, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing could have been great as a Star Trek actor. I don't know. I mean, it never hurts to throw Hugh Jackman in something, It's not going to hurt. I mean, he's already been in X-Men with Patrick Stewart. Throw him in a Star Trek thing. Fuck it. Complete the set. Right? Ian McKellen. Just get all of Patrick Stewart's friends and co-stars who haven't also been in Star Trek and throw them in. Get Ian McKellen to play somebody. Come on. Right? Willem Dafoe. Fuck. Willem Dafoe. Conversation over. Get Willem Dafoe in a Star Trek thing. Kemp says, hey, Steve, a couple weeks ago, I read that Cirroc Lofton on his podcast had alluded to Avery Brooks being blacklisted in Hollywood. Do you know anything about this? It would be nice to see Captain Sisko again in one of those newer Treks. I have not heard that. I don't listen to that podcast, so I didn't hear Cirroc Lofton say that. For people who don't know, Cirroc Lofton plays Jake on Deep Space Nine. And he and Avery Brooks are close in real life and have been ever since they were on the show together. So I mean, if he would know, but obviously I'm just some dipshit with a YouTube channel. I have no inside connections at all. So he would know better than I. So if he says that Avery Brooks has been blacklisted, I mean, I would, listen to him. Don't listen to me. I don't know. I have never heard that. Avery Brooks has not worked for a long time and is, as far as I know, like isn't really seen in public that much. And, doesn't do conventions anymore even. I always sort of assumed that that's just how he wanted it, that he sort of withdrew from the public life because he preferred it that way and he had made his money and he didn't need to work anymore. And that was fine with him. But maybe that is not the case. I don't know, but I would have no inside knowledge of that. I would hope that is not the case. I would hope that Avery Brooks's withdrawal from acting and from public life is by his choice, not because it's been forced upon him. But I don't know. Like you're asking you're asking the wrong guy. Hopefully that is not the case. But like I said, the guy who played Jake on Deep Space Nine might know better than me. Russell says, hey, Steve, I'm excited about this Q&A because it's about Cobra Kai. Spoilers, I guess, for those who haven't seen the show or the Karate Kid films. Okay, here it goes. I loved the original Karate Kid film and its sequel, and until the new series came out, I wasn't a huge fan of Karate Kid 3 or the next Karate Kid. The thing with Karate Kid 3 is with this final season, it makes that film more interesting. I love the callbacks to all the characters while also bringing new material to the table. The two most important characters are Chozen and Terry Silver, and technically a third John Kreese. While I am not hopeful for a redemption arc with him, especially after trying to kill Daniel, it is interesting to see where they go with his character. But for Chozen, what are your thoughts that he'll be the new sensei? Not replacing, because you can never replace, but rather supplement Miyagi. Finally, I've seen a lot of videos about Daniel being the real bully. I disagree with this. What are your thoughts? Well, I was very happy to see Chozen show up because I love Karate Kid Part 2, and I think Chozen and Sato are fantastic supervillains. They're basically cartoon villains. And they're great. They're both so goddamn good. And so when Chozen popped up briefly in the previous season, I was like, oh shit, it's Chozen, right? And now to see that he's apparently going to come back in a more regular role in the next season, because they had that tease with him at the end of the fourth season. I'm really hyped about that because I love Chozen. I think he's a great character. And yeah, I think this season, it does. I don't know if it necessarily redeems Karate Kid 3, because Karate Kid 3 is not a good movie. It's a very fun movie. Like I could watch it and have a great time watching it, but it's not like a good movie. But it's a hoot, and one of the big reasons why it's a hoot is because of Terry Silver. He's just a great cartoon villain. And I do think the new season of Cobra Kai deepens him and redeems him a little, makes him a more interesting character as opposed to just being a cartoon that's fun to watch. Like it gives him some depth and some humanity and some complexity that I think is really interesting and done really well. And it's something that Cobra Kai is really good at, is taking these characters that originated in this ridiculous 1980s film series and actually, first of all, making them really funny, because at its heart, Cobra Kai is still a comedy. And it is still able to find really, really funny stuff to do with these characters, but also to deepen them as characters and as human beings. And it's really, really good at that. Of all of we've talked this show a lot about, nostalgia and fan service and stuff like that. Cobra Kai is probably the best of those shows, of the shows that reach back into the past and get old stuff and pull it into the present to revisit it. Cobra Kai is, I think, one of the best, if not the best, at doing that. because they find fresh ways of looking at old characters. They bring in fresh new characters. They have new angles on things. They're very much in on the joke, and are able to know what is funny and to get laughs from stuff. And it's a really, really, really great show. Um, so yeah, and as for Chosen being the new Miyagi, I don't know if he'll be the new Miyagi. I think the show has shown enough respect to the Miyagi character that I don't think they would try to replace Miyagi with anybody. Um, but it would be interesting to see Chosen there on a more regular basis. And is Daniel the real bully? No, I don't think Daniel is the real bully. But I do think Daniel, especially in the first movie, is kind of a twerp who has it coming. Like, I don't think anybody, he's what, 16 in the first movie. He doesn't deserve, to like get his ass kicked and to be bullied and beaten up like he is. Like, nobody deserves that. But he's kind of a jerk. Like Daniel is a jerk in the first Karate Kid. He's a jerk to Mr. Miyagi. He's a jerk to his mom. He's a jerk to Allie. He's a jerk to Johnny. The only difference is Johnny will beat the shit out of him for it. And it's not that Johnny and the other Cobra Kai guys are without blame, because they're jerks too. But it's not, I don't read the movie as, oh, poor Daniel. He's being bullied by these guys, and now he learns karate and he can stand up for himself and he's a great hero. Like, he's kind of a jerk. Like, not so much of a jerk that he deserves to get the shit kicked out of him on such a regular basis, but he's still kind of a jerk. So I know I don't think Daniel is the real bully, but I don't think he is, the innocent knight in shining armor hero. And last question is from John Burns. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. Hey, Steve, hydrate. Right there with you, buddy. Okay. I know Neil Young, and I love Neil Young, but the news that what Neil Young did cost Spotify $4 billion, that's the part that caught me off guard. Also, you've seen all of the Eric Clapton music, right? Eric's a freaking nutbar. Jon Stewart. Anyway, Canada's going to qualify for the World Cup. It's in Qatar, and I've heard about the negatives that rich people are getting money they don't need for working, and that workers' rights should be important. But I'm wondering if it's important that this is the first World Cup in the Arab world, and it would be cool to have Iran host sometime in the future. I understand Doha has rich people in it, but the fact that it's in the Arab world and not Europe or South America, or God forbid, Canada, Edmonton, and Toronto, World Cup 2026, that's better, right? Soccer is beloved all over the world. It's the most popular sport in the world. It can be used as a way of change, right? And have you seen the crap with the Olympics? As for the crap with the Olympics, you're going to have to be more specific. I've seen a lot of crap associated with the Olympics. I know that our American diplomats are boycotting the games. I know a couple of other countries are saying they're not going to send diplomatic missions to the Olympics because of them being in Beijing and because of China's human rights violations and such. I respect that. I think that's a very good thing to do. So if that's the crap you're talking about, yes, I have seen that crap. The problem, look, it's not just that Doha has rich people in it. It's not just that rich people are making money. I've seen accusations that some of those buildings and venues and such that have been constructed for the World Cup in Qatar were built using slave labor. Like, that's a little bit beyond, well, it's rich people profiting off the labor of the poor that happens everywhere. Like, if they were using slave labor, that's I don't know. So I mean, look, I would love it if the first World Cup in the Arab world became a transformative event and it led to great reforms and progress in Qatar and in Iran and in all these other countries in the Arab world that where people are suffering under these repressive regimes. I think that would be wonderful, and I hope that happens. And maybe in the long run, over many, many years and decades, that will happen, and we can look back and say that, the World Cup in Qatar was a watershed event. I hope that that is the case. But people still have a right to be upset that they built the stadium with slaves. You know, like, I feel like you can't just say, "Oh, but it's, you know, it's an international event and maybe it'll spur change." It doesn't make it okay that they use slaves to build the stadium, if that is in fact what happened, you know? So I think people complaining have a right to complain, and I think the things that they're complaining about are are valid, you know, are reasonable complaints. Um, Okay, so that is the last of the patron and member questions. So now I will turn my attention to the live chat. And actually, before I get too far into the live chat, I do want to. I'll go ahead and tell a I'll tell a Challenger discovery story. I'll tell one Challenger discovery story because there is one story that is actually that I feel like is actually a story with a punchline, that Dana and I were talking about privately the other day that I can share, that I may have shared on a live stream or in a video before, but I feel like it's been a while if I had. So the Challenger exploded in 1986, and the space shuttle program was basically put on hold for about a year and a half. I think maybe it was like 14 months. It wasn't quite a year and a half, but it was a long time. And up until that point, like when the Challenger exploded, the space shuttle program had really gotten up to speed, and they were doing shuttle launches like several times a year. Like it was becoming like a regular thing, right? The shuttle program was really humming. And then the Challenger exploded, and they had to stop it. They came to a grinding halt. So they took a year and a half off, and they retooled the shuttles, and they introduced new safety measures, and they overhauled the launch procedure, and double checked all the everything, and finally they were ready to do another shuttle launch. And the shuttle that was up to go next was the shuttle Discovery, which I think at the time was the newest one. And so it was going to be the launch of the Discovery that was going to bring back the space shuttle program. And my school was not one of the schools that was watching when Challenger exploded. When Challenger exploded, because Krista McAuliffe was on board, and Krista McAuliffe was a teacher and was part of a program that would have seen teachers become astronauts more regularly and go to space. A lot of school kids were watching the Challenger launch when it exploded. Fortunately, I guess, my school was not. So I did not see the Challenger explosion live. But we were watching the Discovery launch a year and a half or so later. So we were all in the cafeteria. We had a special assembly in the cafeteria to watch the Discovery launch because it was in the morning and it was on a school day. And I guess I would have been in second or third grade. And we're all sitting in the cafeteria. They have multiple TVs like in front of the room, and we're watching the space shuttle launch. We're watching the launch of Discovery. And our principal, Mr. Price, who was a piece of shit, and I hated him then, and I hate him now, and he's dead, and I'm glad. Mr. Price was at the front of the cafeteria. He was standing next to the TV. And of course, when Challenger exploded when the booster rockets separated, right? That was the point during the launch when the explosion happened. So when we got to that point in the Discovery launch, when the boosters were about to separate, that's like the crucial point. That's the moment where people who knew what to expect were like really nervous because this is what happened last time. So Mr. Price is standing next to the TV, and right as it gets to the point where they're about to do the booster separation, Mr. Price points at the TV and turns to all of us children gathered in the cafeteria watching this, knowing that the fucking thing exploded last time at this point. And he says, okay, this is where it blew up last time. And like, even as whatever age I was, 8, 9 years old, like I thought, you fucking idiot. What goes through your mind? You're an educator. You've been a fucking educator of children at this point for probably 20 or 30 years, the asshole. He was one of my dad's teachers in high school. So he had been around for a while by that point, right? He'd been around kids of all ages. What goes through your mind when you say, okay, everybody pay attention. This is where it blew up last time. This is where everybody died last time. This was the national tragedy last time. So everybody make sure to have that in your mind as you watch the next few seconds. What the fuck, man? And I saw him put ketchup on a piece of chocolate cake once. He was a monster. So that's my space shuttle story. Dana, I hope you found that entertaining. I hope you found it as entertaining the second time as you did the first time. I hope I told it as well this time as I told it when I was talking to you on the phone about it the other day. Okay, now I'll pay attention to the live chat. And I just got a super chat from Tony. It says, Steve, I love your Kirk breakdown of Wrath of Khan. Do you think you would be willing to do a dive into Picard's Borg turn in First Contact? Possibly. Yeah. I would do. I think, I mean, I've done videos that have referenced First Contact, but I haven't done an entire video just about First Contact. And I love First Contact. It's one of my favorite of the Star Trek movies. So I could totally see myself doing that. I don't have any plans to right now, but I can totally see myself doing that for sure. Yeah. And thank you for the super chat. Throughout the Trekkie says, you did an awesome shipping of 7 video, but why did you quantum leap the show? Referring to me throwing in the bleak ending at the end where I said, oh, by the way, they never made it home. Because I thought it was funny. That's the only reason, because I thought it was funny. Yeah, Throughout the Trekkie, yeah. He put ketchup on a piece of chocolate cake. If there's a hell, he's there. He was awful. 25 AD says, I'm forcing myself to watch Atlas Shrugged to watch along with a bad movie podcast. Why can't right-wingers ever be like, I agree with the message, but this is terribly written? I know, right? Like, do something. Like, you could be like, oh, look, yeah, I mean, she wants to crush the poor and she wants to elevate rich people to godhood, but we can at least get a better script, right? Yeah, I agree. Super chat from John Burns, who says, clarification, the NHL canceled going to China because of issues with COVID, not because they had any issues with Chinese human rights. Well, that is also a very good reason. And thank you for the super chat. And thank you for this one, too. There's another super chat from John Burns who says, Christopher Plummer was the Christopher Lee of the original Star Trek movies. He played a Klingon with an eye patch bolted to his skull. Too white and dead today to do it. Very sad. You get my point. Well, no, white people are still allowed to play Klingons. But yeah, I mean, I did a whole video about General Chang. General Chang is my favorite Klingon. Yes, Christopher Plummer was amazing as General Chang in Star Trek 6. And it's amazing that Christopher Plummer even made a Star Trek movie. It's just like when I see Louise Fletcher playing Wynn on Deep Space Nine, right? I get the same feeling as when I see Christopher Plummer playing General Chang in Star Trek 6. I'm like, Christopher Plummer did a Star Trek movie. Christopher Plummer did a Star Trek movie? What was Christopher Plummer doing in Star Trek movie? One of the greatest actors of his generation. He did a Star Trek movie. You know? Louise Fletcher, one of the greatest actors of her generation, Oscar winner Louise Fletcher, Nurse Ratched, was a secondary villain on a Star Trek show. And she was great. And it was amazing that she was even there. Like, it's still surreal when I think about it. Derogatory Trekkie says, you know what? Your Shipping 7 video tweet was retweeted by Nina Ruzica, who wrote the comic Death and Maiden. Did you hear of that? No, I have not heard of that comic, and I didn't know that it was retweeted by that person. So thank you for telling me. I had no idea. CMX says, went back and listened to the late seating 300. Hadn't started listening when you did that one. Amazing. I love that episode too. 300 is a movie that I take such pleasure in shitting on. Like, I feel like it deserves every ounce of bile that I can spew on it. So yeah, that was a fun episode. That was a cathartic episode to record, because like I had to watch that movie and I despise that movie, and then it all just comes. I got to play Jason, because usually Jason is the one, if Jason like really really doesn't like something, he's much more emphatic and much more sort of brutal, you know. And I'm even when I really don't like a movie, I'm not usually that, you know, just completely negative about, like, I'm a little more measured, but Jason will just fucking go off on a movie. And so with 300, I felt like I could do that. Like I felt that emotion, and that was, it was so good. Dana says, it didn't occur to me, but I didn't see the Discovery launch. I bet it's on YouTube. Super chat from Kirak 2011 says Louise Fletcher will always be Nurse Ratched and the grandma in the original Flowers in the Attic. Yeah, she is such a great actor. If anybody hasn't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, she is so good in that. It's one of those, like, I have often said, when Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor for There Will Be Blood, I said, it's a good thing that Best Actor is not a defended title, because Daniel Day-Lewis would still have it. And I feel like with Best Actress, it would be Louise Fletcher. Like, she as Nurse Ratched was so goddamn good. Even though it's been like 45 years since that movie came out, like, how many performances have been better than Louise Fletcher, male or female? Like, she's just so goddamn good in that movie. So yeah. True55 AD says, suppose you're running a trans-majority farming commune in rural Oregon. Is it crazy to imagine the police won't defend you if you get targeted by right-wing militias in the area? I mean, first of all, what am I doing running a trans-majority farming commune? But I get your point. Look, I'm not going to... It's... If a trans commune feels that they need to stockpile weapons to defend themselves, it is not for me as a cis guy to tell them they shouldn't do it. But you're not going to get me to applaud it or to celebrate it. Like, I don't think it's a good thing. I just don't. I don't think adding more guns to the population is a good thing. I think what the government should do is go to those right-wing militias in the area and take their fucking guns. I know that's not going to happen, but I'm just, yeah, you're not going to get me to support, well, it's just no. But like I said, it's not up to me. It's not for me to say. And I'm not going to judge a group of marginalized people who feel that they need to arm themselves to defend themselves. But I'm not gonna, it's not for me to approve anyway. They don't need my approval, but I am very, very reluctant to give it. Liam Foley says, do you think Spock's brain would have improved if they had said his consciousness had been stolen instead of his brain? Oh, no. The fact that it's his brain is what makes the whole episode. See, I don't want to improve Spock's brain. Like, I guess, yes, you could say there are things they could do that would have allowed them to make a better episode in a more traditional sense. And maybe not having them steal Spock's literal brain might have been one of those, or not having Spock's body walk around, by remote control the whole episode. Like, there are things that maybe would have made it a better episode. But would it really have? I mean, the thing that's so great about it is that it's so terrible, so I don't know if it would have, made an improvement. Dr. Trekkie says, what's wrong with writing a Mary Sue? Batman is a Gary Stu. Old Shatterhand from Winnetou is a Gary Stu. You could even say Captain Kirk is a Gary Stu. Well, but I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But I do think there's more to a Mary Sue than just having like a really competent character. Like, Mary Sues are also often author insert characters, and that can be a problem. I mean, it's not that it can't ever possibly work, but it's just it's one of those tropes that's usually a sign of weak writing and is usually best avoided. Dana says, you need to write the bad date Batman story, please. I don't know if I'm good enough. I honestly don't know if I have it in me to do that story justice, but Bad Date Batman is the perfect title, so you've got me about half sold on it already. Like, it's definitely going to be called Bad Date Batman. So you've got me on that. Um, I don't know if I just don't know if I have the chops. I don't know if I'm a good enough writer of farce to pull that off, but it's tempting. It's tempting. Um, Correct 2011 with the super chat says, in my opinion, for TOS, the worst episode was Turnabout Intruder. Agree or not? That's a good one, by which I mean a bad one. Yeah. Because Turnabout Intruder is not just a bad episode, but it also has that gross, like, sexism in it that makes it even worse. It's kind of like TOS's version of TNG's Code of Honor, where, like, it would be a bad episode anyway, but then you throw in all the weird, creepy bigotry, and it's like, oh God, forget it. You know? Yeah, Turnabout Intruders, I think that's a good choice for worst TOS episode for sure. Um, Mr. System 96 says having guns in the first place is stupid only in America. You are preaching to the choir, my friend. You're preaching to the choir. And Jobin 2112, where was the Enterprise E during the Dominion War? It was obviously off doing something else that was very important, but unrelated to the war. I'm sure it was covered. Well, it was probably covered in the comics or the novels or something. I don't know specifically because it was never really. I think what did they given did. Well, I guess was insurrection. Insurrection was before the war really kicked into high gear, and then Nemesis I think was after the war, so they just kind of avoided mentioning it. Here's a super chat from Tony, who says 20 years ago, I went to defend freedom after 9/11. Once I saw a president lead an insurrection against the government, I now believe more than ever, none of us are safe. Please protect yourself. I'm a huge fan of yours. Well, thank you very much. I mean, if by protect yourself you mean buying a gun, I'm not going to do that because guns don't. I mean, the person most likely to be harmed by a gun they have in their house is a person that lives in that house. And also, I just don't like them, so I'm not going to buy a gun. But I appreciate I appreciate your concern. Gerard Trekkie says, so if you would be doing the Talia al Ghul plot in Batman 66, how would you have told the Damian Wayne story, and who would play Damian? I'm with Dana on this. Damian does not exist in my world. Dana and I see completely eye to eye on this. There will be no Damian Wayne. Like, because Dana and I have a collaborative fanfic series that we're working on, although neither one of us have written. Actually, Dana has written on her most recent story more recently than I have. But you know, we see very much eye to eye on this. Like no, there is no Damian Wayne. Actually, I have a joke. My video for Monday will be a Batman video, will be another best Batman ever video, where the subject is the untold legend of the Batman miniseries, but there's a joke in it about Robin, because part of the miniseries is retelling like old bits of Batman's backstory and stuff, and it goes over Robin's origin, and because it was originally published in 1980, there had still only been one Robin, which was Dick Grayson. And I say in the video, you know, isn't it incredible that for Batman's first 40 years of existence, he somehow got by with just the one Robin. And in the 40 years since then, he's had like 15 Robins. How did comic book writers ever come up with Batman stories when they weren't just constantly inventing new Robins? It's incredible. So, how I would tell the Damian story, there would be no Damian story. Dana, maybe Tony means wear a condom just in case. That's why I got the surgery. Although I guess, I could also catch an STD. About really, pregnancy is the worst STD. But I'm kidding. Mostly kidding. But no, I suppose that is wise. If I am ever involved with a partner who I am not completely sure of their history, I may want to protect myself just in case. I'm not really kidding, Dana. No, I'm not. Bull 705 says, would you consider writing a follow-up fan fiction to your Justice League Trump story where he tries to recruit the Justice League to investigate the election? Oh boy. Yes. So this is going back many, many years, but yes, I wrote a couple of DC Comics fanfic stories where the Justice League interacted with or responded to Trump in some ways. I think it was before Trump was elected, wasn't it? It was during the campaign. It wasn't, I didn't write any during the actual Trump presidency, but that is such a great idea to do one where Trump tries to hire the Justice League to investigate. Oh shit. That's such a good idea. God damn, you motherfuckers are giving me like all these ideas for fanfic that I don't know if I'm going to have time to write. Cause now that Dana has given me the title of Bad Date Batman, I feel like I have to at least try to do something with the Batman farce idea. And now with Trump trying to hire the Justice League to investigate the election, like that's such a good idea. I feel like I should do that. I have to write these down. Super chat from John Burns, who says, during COVID, I don't need a gun. Steve, when we get zombies instead of a pandemic, I've decided to make a change in what I need. No, there ain't going to be no zombies. And besides, you don't need a gun to kill zombies. You need an axe or a bat or something. You don't need to be shooting zombies. You can axe them to death, and it's way more satisfying. Haven't you ever played Doom? I mean, yeah, sure, the shotgun is fun in Doom, but you know what's more fun than the shotgun? The fucking chainsaw. God damn it. Do. 2 to 5 AD says, if things do go bad in the US after 2024, are you worried things will get so bad that it won't be safe for you to be an outspoken leftist on the internet? I am not seriously worried about that. I mean, I guess the possibility exists in my mind, but I'm not like seriously concerned about it. I'm more concerned about other people than I am about myself. If things go bad after 2024, I'm much more concerned about more vulnerable people, you know? Let me see. Yeah, C-Mac, exactly. The shots just attract more zombies. If you kill zombies quietly, the other zombies don't know anything's going on. Just get a nice sharp axe and just go hacking, Just hack them up, right? Come on. And plus, didn't they do a Mythbusters? Wasn't there like a Mythbusters where like Jamie had a gun and Adam had like a chainsaw or something, and it actually wasn't as lopsided as you might think. Like I think the gun came out ahead just by a little bit, but it wasn't like, lopsided. Like Adam with the chainsaw did pretty good for himself against the zombies, and Jamie with the gun still got eaten eventually anyway. So I mean, like just give me a chainsaw. Dorota Trekkie says, who would you have cast as Talia in Batman 66? Jeez. I don't know. Who would have been a good Talia in 1966? I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. Um, and John, I missed that super chat. Let me scroll back and find it here. Um, yes, here we go. Sorry, John, I missed this one. Super chat from John says, in the Orville chat, someone asked if there could be an acting Wesley Crusher. Many didn't like it. I suggested acting Ensign Harry Kim. Lots of likes. Um, like in other words, like if they could be on the show, like if there could be like a Wesley character on the Orville, and they didn't like that, but they liked having a Harry Kim character on the show. I don't really get that. I'm not sure what the context is. Is there like are they saying they don't want like a Wesley character on the Orville, but they would be okay with a Harry character? I'm not really sure what's going on there. Um, Intergalactic Classics. I pronounce it Raish because of Batman the Animated Series, but I have been told by multiple people that the more correct Arabic pronunciation is Raz. So I guess I should pronounce it Raz, but I still just sort of instinctively pronounce it Raish because of the animated series. But I will make an effort to try to pronounce it Raish. Dana, I don't know if Louise Fletcher would have been right for Talia. Somebody said Natalie Wood, Diana Rigg. I mean, I guess in it was the 60s, so nobody gave a shit about, the ethnicity of the actors, but it would be nice to find someone for Talia who was at least of some sort of Middle Eastern heritage, wouldn't you think? To play Talia? To play a character named Talia al Ghul? I mean, I know they cast it's just, like 12, 15 years ago, they cast fucking Liam Neeson to play Ra's al Ghul. But, I don't know. I don't know. Super chat from Stephen Hart, who says, if you've seen the game Dead Rising, the best weapon against zombies is clearly a sledgehammer duct taped to a fire axe. It's basically a mace. Now, there you go. There you go. Sledgehammer taped to a fire axe. Perfect. Jobin2112 says, I feel like leftists are trying to warn everyone about the fascism that is brewing, and the Democratic Party isn't doing enough to try and prevent it. Well, no, I agree with that. I agree with that completely. Lucille Ball, dear Alta Trekkie? Lucille Ball in 1966 as Talia? I don't think so. I don't know if Lucy would ever have been right for Talia. I mean, she just isn't the right type. And I mean, Lucille Ball was a genius, but I don't think I would have cast Lucy as Talia. Oh, I get you, John. So he's literally Harry Kim on the show, and he joins the Orville, and he's an acting ensign. I got you. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake with that one. 285 AD says, I wonder if modern nostalgia is partly driven by a desire to live in a time where it doesn't feel like the world is ending. In the 1750s, the environment was fine, even if things sucked a bit. I'm sure that's probably part of it. But I mean, I think certain people in the present have always had nostalgia for past eras. It's not just a modern thing. But I mean, as far as people living right now, I'm sure that's part of it. Mr. System 96 says Solaranite is the best weapon against zombies. Well, yes, of course, because if you explode the sunlight, you explode the universe. Liam Foley says Yvonne DiCarlo is as Talia. Now that, you know what? I think that's the best suggestion so far. Yeah. Let me see. Let me do some Googling here. Yeah, you know what? That might be the best suggestion I've seen so far. And she, let me see. And Adam West was, she was a few years older than Adam West, but not like significantly. So I think it would have been age appropriate. Like they would have been in the same age range for Adam West's Batman. That's actually pretty good. Yvonne DiCarlo. I like that. Yvonne DiCarlo is Talia in the 66 Batman. Um, Super chat from Keurig 2011 says, my Star Trek question. I liked Jellicoe, and I've noticed a pattern with Riker feeling threatened when someone new enters the series. For example, Shelby. He treats them both poorly. Agree or disagree? No, I agree. I agree. Maybe it's part of Riker's complacency, which is a part of his character. He gets comfortable with the people he's around, and when someone new comes in, he's like, "I don't like the new guy." I think that's probably part of his character. And also, super chat from John Burns, who says, "I do remember the South Park where Cartman had a chainsaw and chopped up a lot of people, and then they found out, no, just kill the first zombie." I didn't see that one. Um, but it sounds like something Cartman would do. Derogatory Trekkie says, "Is wrestling on today? If so, who is fighting, and who do you want to see win?" Yes, wrestling is on tonight at 10. And give me a second and I'll look up the card. I don't know it off the top of my head. Dana says yes, but if Liam Neeson is Raz, then it makes more sense if Lucille Ball is Talia. They're just actually not the same characters at all. That's true. That's true. Yeah, CMAC, exactly. People have thought the rapture was any day now for 2,000 years. Exactly. Yeah, there's always been like, that in the kind of shared consciousness. Let me look up the card for wrestling tonight. AW Rampage card tonight. Let's see. Mercedes Martinez versus Thunder Rosa. I'm rooting for Thunder Rosa for that one. Adam Cole versus Evil Uno. Well, Adam Cole's winning that one. He just lost to Orange Cassidy last week, so he's not gonna he's not losing to Evil Uno for Christ's sake. FTW title Ricky Starks versus Jay Lethal. That might be a pretty good match. I'm looking forward to that as a match. I think that might be the best match on the show. I think Ricky Starks is going to win that one. And then for the TNT title, that'll probably be the main event: Sammy Guevara versus Isaiah Cassidy. That will also probably be a good match. And Sammy's winning that one. And at least those are my picks for who will win, and I think those are, in every case, those are who I would want to win too. Intergalactic Classic says, I recently watched DS9 from the beginning. Am I wrong that the early episodes are very, very dull? You should ask Dana, because Dana has been watching it with me, and we're getting through the second season now, but we watched the first season in its entirety. Dana, did you think the early episodes of DS9 were very, very dull? I know a lot of people think that. I actually mostly really like the first season of Deep Space Nine. I think it gets better as it goes on. I mean, I think the first season is definitely the weakest season, but that doesn't mean that I think it's bad. I actually think the first season of Deep Space Nine overall is very, very strong, including some of the early episodes. For instance, I think the pilot is one of the best pilots of any Star Trek show. Definitely way better than TNG's pilot. And better than TOS, better than either TOS pilot too. I think it's a much better episode than either The Cage or Where No Man Has Gone Before. So I know I don't think that the early episodes of Deep Space Nine are very, very dull, but I know there are a lot of people that hold that opinion. Oh, Dana says, I don't think that's fair. I have an advantage. I get to watch the episodes with all of you guys. Oh, that's true. And you don't really pay attention anyway. You're always talking to the chat. Geraldo Trekkie, I think I watched Spencer. I don't know if I ever actually watched an episode of Hawk. I did watch Spencer for Hire sporadically back in the day, um, but I remember very little of it. Like, I just remember that Robert Urich was in it, um, and Avery Brooks from time to time. John Burns with a super chat says there's a documentary about what happened when Telltale Games shut down. It's very good. Plus, they're back. Batman 3, Wolf Among Us 2, The Expanse. Okay. Good to know. Anybody who's interested in that, there you go. There's a good documentary about Telltale Games. 255 AD says, someone I know online told me their job requires them to kick homeless people out of hotels because they pretend to be guests in the refectory. Could you bring yourself to do that job? No, I don't think I could. No, I wouldn't want to. No, I wouldn't want to do that. That's no, I couldn't. I would not take a job that requires me to displace or harass homeless people. No. Kirok 2011 says, hey, what's wrong with the cage or where no man has gone before or Encounter at Farpoint? Well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with. I mean, I don't think Encounter at Farpoint is a good show. I just don't think it's a very good episode at all. The cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before are fine. I just think Emissary, the Deep Space Nine pilot, is a lot better. I just think it's a better show. I think of those three, of The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before and Encounter at Farpoint, the only one that I would say is actually definitely a bad episode of television is Encounter at Farpoint. I think The Cage and Where No Man Before, I don't think either one of them is like fantastic, but they're both fine. But I just think Emissary is a lot better. And you're also Trekkie. I have not seen Terry O'Quinn in Hawaii Five-0, and I didn't watch any of Lost, so I can't rate him in those. I can rate him in TNG and and Millennium. He was really good in Millennium, so I think he was better in Millennium because he was in Millennium a lot more. He was only in TNG for that one episode, so I would say he's better in Millennium than he is in TNG. CMX says, I'm a couple years older than you, and the only reason I remember Spencer for Hire is because I grew up in Boston. Yeah, my dad used to watch it, so I would watch it, like if he was watching it, but I remember very little of it. Like I remember that it was on, and I remember the theme song a little, but I don't remember that much more. So, just a heads up, I'm going to end the show at 8. So we have about 8 minutes before I wrap up. So if anybody has like last minute questions or stuff you want me to talk about, you can go ahead and start throwing them in the chat, and then we'll start winding things down when we get on toward 8 o'clock here. Yeah, Cast Iron Chaos has check out Deliverance, where Ronnie Cox does a good. Deliverance is a great movie. I mean, the first time I watched Deliverance, I had already heard like the jokes, because there's all like, the squeal like a pig jokes. And it was sort of made fun of. But when you actually watch the movie, Deliverance is a really good movie. And the jokes are still, I mean, the jokes are the jokes, but Deliverance is a really good movie. And I mean, Ronnie Cox is in it. Ned Beatty, Burt Reynolds. I mean, goddamn, what a cast. Bill McKinney, Jesus Christ, it's a really good cast. Serena McGee, yes, Social Justice Alchemy. This weekend, a bunch of anarchists and leftists sit around and chat for Social Justice Alchemy at 7 p.m. UTC, 2 p.m. EST each Sunday. Come and join them. And there's the link that some random geek has dropped in the chat. So yes, check out Social Justice Alchemy on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Social Justice Alchemy channel. Yes, Random Geek John Voight was in Deliverance. Yes, boy. And he is the worms have eaten his brain since, but he is really good in Deliverance. 255 AD. I don't know how bad things would have to get. They would have to get a lot worse than they are. I don't know how bad things would have to get. They're a lot worse. A lot worse. Kirak 2011. I think I saw the first Mannequin movie, but it's been a long time. Jobin 2112. Which Trek show had the best series finale? TNG. All Good Things, I think, is the best finale. I think it's not even really close. I mean, like, I like What You Leave Behind. I mean, the last episode of Deep Space Nine, I think, is good. I really didn't like it at the time. Like, when it first aired, I really didn't like the last episode of Deep Space Nine. It has grown on me since. I've watched it a few times since, and I think it's better now than I did back then. But no, All Good Things is the best last episode of a Star Trek show. I mean, it's fantastic. It's All Good Things is a good enough episode that they like that could have been a movie. You know what I mean? It's just a really, really strong story. It's a great idea. It's a great concept for a final episode of the show that allows them to sort of retrace their steps, but also chart a course forward. And yeah, All Good Things by far for me is the best Star Trek, the best final episode of a Star Trek show. Oh yeah. Um, 2G5 AD says, I've answered all the questions, so I can leave now. Well, you know what? I'm going to start wrapping up anyway, so it's just coincidental. Like, I don't need your permission. But since you said that, and since it just so happens to be close to the time when I said I wanted to end the show, I'm going to do that. So Liam Foley, do I like historical fiction? Not like not as a thing. I mean, I've seen examples of historical fiction that I've enjoyed, but it's not like a genre that I particularly gravitate toward. Cast Iron Chaos, good idea. A video, why Encounter at Farpoint sucks, but All Good Things is great. I could probably do something with that. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the show now. Thank you all so much for the questions. Those of you who dropped me super chats, thank you so much for your generosity. Those of you who are patrons or channel members, thank you so much for your support, especially those of you who submitted questions this time. And there's a last super chat from Kirak 2011 says, I disagree, my friend. The TNG finale would have been good had it not been for the 4 TNG films that followed it. Yeah, that doesn't affect it for me. That doesn't make a difference for me. I view it as on its own terms, as its own thing. And I think it's a really, really well done piece. Like the movies that follow it do not diminish it for me. I view it on its own terms. I think it was fantastic. All right. So don't forget the charity links, charitylinks.page that are listed in the video description. If you can help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand, we encourage you to do so. So click the link and see who you can give a helping hand to. And also don't forget that just as I did my live stream tonight, tomorrow on her YouTube channel, our good friend Dana, who has been in the chat with us the whole time, will be doing her next live stream, the next episode of her show, The Saturday Six. It will be on Dana's YouTube channel tomorrow starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. And the link to Dana's YouTube channel is in the description of this video. And Dana told me earlier, but after I had started this show, that she's scheduled the live stream and everything. So I will go ahead and add that link to the description of this video as well after I get off the air here. But please join us. I'll be in the live chat, and the last couple of shows, Dana's had a nice little regular audience that hang out in the live chat and watch the show, and we all talk. And it's been a really, really fun show the last 2 times she's done it. So this will be her 3rd episode of the Saturday Six. So please join us for the Saturday Six on Dana's channel. It is linked in the description. It is tomorrow, Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where Dana shares 6 items of good news, of 6 items that give you reason for hope and for optimism, and to put a smile on your face as we continue to deal with this shitty world. And it's not just toxic positivity stuff. It's like actual good news that you can be happy about, you know? So that's really, really cool. So join Dana tomorrow on her channel for the Saturday Six, and join me in the live chat, because that's where I'll be. Also, don't forget patreon.com/Steve Shives to support my channel, or click the join button to become a channel member. Don't forget, actually, I have a graphic for that. There you go. Look at that. Patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron, or click the join button to become a channel member and help support this channel and help me to continue to do the work that I do. And also, don't forget that I'm also co-host of some podcasts that are part of the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts. I co-host Late Seating, the movie review podcast with Jason Harding, where we take a look at classic films and give them a fresh review and see if they deserve whatever reputation they have, be it good or bad. Our most recent episode went up last week, and it was about Bad Boys, which is an absolutely horrible movie that nobody should ever watch. But if you want to know what Jason and I think about it, beyond what I just said, listen to that episode. And our next episode, which we are recording in a few days, will be about Twilight, which may be an even worse movie. So not a very good run lately in terms of quality of films for Late Seating, but they're good shows. Our shows about the bad movies have been really good shows. So check that out. And also, I'm on the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast, along with Jason and Dana, where we play characters who live and work aboard now the Enterprise D during the era of Star Trek The Next Generation. We are closing in on the end of our 4th season. We're not quite there yet. We still have a few episodes to go, but we're getting close. This has been a really, really good season, this 4th season. I think the show has really come into its own. And I hope you enjoy it if you're listening to it. And if you haven't been listening to it, I wish you would. Listen to the Ensign's Log. So you can find the links to everything in the description, and you can also listen to it on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Lemmy-listen. So there you go, everybody. Thank you all so much for being with me. Thank you for watching. Don't forget Dana's live stream tomorrow on her channel, and I will see you next week for new videos, and I will see you on Wednesday for another live stream with Dana, where we watch part 2 of the Maquis on Deep Space Nine, and then I'll see you back here in 2 weeks for another edition of Ask Away. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for the support. And I'll see you later. Take care, everybody.